hello Virginia Stage folks. As you may know, I'm Connor from our Virginia Stage marketing office, and this is our wonderful and talented composer and musician extraordinaire, Jake Hall. Some of you may recognize him from his work with us in Oliver Twist, and we are delighted to have him come back and join us for some work on Streetcar. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yay. So my first question, which is the question I'm sure all of our patrons are wondering, is Streetcar, when people think of the show, they don't normally think of music as being a part of the show. So I'm sure a lot of patrons are going to wonder how did a musician become part of the show, and what is that music to be expected in Streetcar?
So I think the idea originated with Chris Hanna, who's directing it. And when you look at the play, there are stage directions that talk about a distant jazz piano is heard, or you hear a jazz band around the corner at one of the local places that's near the Kowalski's apartment, or there's times where Blanche has these kinds of distant memories of this folk tune of a Suviana, where she hears that and recurs throughout. And so those are some elements that Tennessee Williams put into the script itself and into it, but the idea with incorporating the music the way we're doing it for this production, this adaptation of it, again, Chris's idea was to take something that's really evocative and very human sounding, in this case, which is solo saxophone, and let that be a part of the story in the way that a character would be as well. And so then a lot of the other research I did after I came up with a few of the main ideas was trying to understand the version of New Orleans that Tennessee Williams would have lived in and experienced at the time, and what is that feeling? And there's a nostalgia, I think, to jazz, to swing specifically. There's a nostalgia that's just part of it now in our psyche from TV and film. But there's an element about, I think, like the geography of a place and the energy of a location, of a physical place, that I think is inspiring to a lot of artists. I tried to figure out, where was their apartment then? Like, if she took this here and stopped here and then transferred here, where was her apartment? And so I got a vague sense of that. So then the music cues all became basically like, they're all named after different streetcar stops in New Orleans. So each cue is built around the idea that we're kind of traveling, starting with the Streetcar Named Desire, we're traveling through New Orleans and slowly kind of spiraling in on where the Kowalski's apartment would have been.
Yeah.
But what's so cool about New Orleans is that there's so much evocative history there, and the street names and the stops. You know, there's Lafayette and Napoleon and these like French, beautiful as French ideas, but also like Lafayette and Napoleon with these mega war figures through our history. And then you have Melpomene, and you have Ursulines, and you have some of these ideas that are built around Greek mythology. And so just being really inspired by how evocative the street names and the places in New Orleans are, taking that and wrapping that, I guess for me, I really like to layer meaning and layer all of that depth in, so that even if it's just behind the scenes, a couple people behind the scenes, we know about it, that's going to help. And as I've been working with Michael, the saxophone player, who's outstanding.
Yeah, I was about to ask you.
He's really great. He's really, really great. Because a lot of the cues there's specific themes and rhythms and notes he's playing, but there's also parts where I'm basically telling him, hey, this is the main idea, but improvise around this, so that he can interact with the cast. And that way the music is very living and very breathing.
Why do you think the show is so important still today? Like, why is it that story that can always be retold? And why do you think it needs to be retold here in Norfolk?
That's awesome. I was talking with Michael. Most of what we talked about yesterday when we were working on stuff was this and these big ideas of, so why are we doing a Streetcar Named Desire? Even a lot of, I think, when it comes down to identity, when you look at someone like Blanche, I think it's really easy to relate to her, because I think I know a lot of people that through social media are able to create a world around them that is the world they want to be in all the time, 24/7, but it's not the world they live in. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. But what then becomes, I think, where it becomes a problem is then people tie their identity to this disassociated version of themselves that's just the highlights, basically.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of, like it's easy to think about all the great things you've done and think about how amazing everyone else's lives look from social media, and then you basically never give the version of yourself that's still in progress a chance to continue in progress and to grow. And so, I think also the other really big thing is that, like, family is always going to be family. Family is always going to be really difficult for some people. really easy and casual for a lot of people, but for some people it's not an easy, casual experience. They're not easy relationships. And so I think there's a little bit of Blanche being so different from Stella, and she's unable, I think, to process the fact that Stella could be so happy with a life that Blanche sees as just like, what, you just kind of live this common life, like those are Stanley's friends, like this is where you live? Blanche can't come to grips with the fact that someone could be happy, so fundamentally happy with something that is, in Blanche's mind, way lower than what expectations for a happy life should be.
Right.
And I think that is a really, again, good parallel into our world right now. Like, you don't have to be the most successful, richest person. You don't have to be the youngest person topping a CEO list. You don't have to be doing all these things that for some people is great. But happiness, I think, is such an independent and private experience. And so, I think it's really easy to look online and say, oh man, they're always happy, their life is, like, everything is great for them. But you don't know that. You don't ever know that anymore, you know? And so I think that those are really important things for us to be able to step back and watch something that is essentially a period piece about a very specific time in New Orleans, but still really understand what's happening right now in our world isn't so different. Just have different vocabulary for right now.
Yeah, no, and that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, yeah, thank you for taking the time to speak with us about this.
Thanks for having me.
And make sure to come to see our wonderful grand reopening of the Wells and our performance of Streetcar Named Desire. It's a production not to be missed, and so we hope to see you all there.